The Chargers absolutely cooked once again with the 2024 schedule release, and we also found out the team can start their season in the best way possible by beating the Raiders.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into a late night edition of the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers for 8 seasons together, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, the schedule is out. The release was awesome, but it's great just knowing how this Charger season is going to play out as far as what the schedule is. And we know they will be opening things up at home in Jim Harbaugh's debut against the team that got the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, the Raiders. So we're going to talk about that, why they have a chance to get off to a hot start, just the fact that they have the 5th easiest schedule in the league this year, and then go over the toughest and easiest 4-game stretches of the year, and of course, the schedule release itself, the Chargers going Sims, absolutely just cooking everybody in the AFC West. Tons of nuggets to get into there that I'm really excited about. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. David, the Chargers get the Raiders in week 1 and week 17. A chance to start their season and end their season with the Raiders. But I think all eyes will be on them in that first week because it's very symbolic, right? The Jim Harbaugh era starts where the Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley era ended with the Raiders. And it's funny because Raiders fans have taken so many victory laps about that 63-21 beating, not realizing that the Chargers are kind of laughing all the way to the bank because it's what landed them Jim Harbaugh in the end. You know what I mean? So it's awesome to start there. I'm glad that we know where the season is going to begin. And if it's not going to be the Chiefs or the Ravens or one of those kind of marquee matchups, I don't think I could ask for a better game to start than the Raiders.
Absolutely not. I am super excited that the Chargers get to go against the Raiders. And yeah, I mean, there's a little part of me that has revenge on the mind. I mean, after that beatdown, I definitely want some get back. I want to start the Jim Harbaugh era off with a bang, and that's by smacking the Raiders to start the 2024 season.
Well, it's kind of a revenge game for the Chargers because of the beatdown, right? But also, like, you get to spoil the new Tom Telesco era in Las Vegas as well, which I think is kind of a double whammy. I'd love to see that. To me, I kind of hope the Chargers just run the ball 40 times for 300 yards in that game and just absolutely bury them in the most kind of Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman style of game where it's just like, we're just going to pound it down your throat the entire time. And let's be honest, the Raiders don't have a quarterback, right? So that's another reason that's nice to get off to that 1 week start with that team because it's like, okay, what are they going to have figured out by then? Is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? Is it going to be Gardner Minshew? 2 names that don't scare you by any means. The Chargers will obviously be fully healthy or as healthy as they'll be all
journeyman
season.
Quarterback and a second-year guy.
Exactly. And I mean, just obviously with how important divisional games are too, like a chance to get off to an 0-1 or 1-0 start in the AFC West, right? A chance to beat a division rival and like a chance for Jim Harbaugh to get off to a great start in his home debut, like to get that game at home. I think the other thing is too, a great chance for Chargers fans to show that things can be different under Jim Harbaugh and to show up and, you know, outduel what the many Raiders fans are that are going to be there. But it's not just week 1 because the Chargers really do have a chance to get off to a hot start in this season overall. I mean, last year, the Chargers started off 0-2 in 2 close games against the Dolphins and the Titans. That was terrible. They lost 4 of their first 6 games, and it felt like the season kind of got off the rails before it even began, right?
Yeah.
This year, you get the Raiders, the Panthers, and the Steelers to start things off. David, to me, that feels like a chance in the very beginning of the season for them to get off to a hot start and kind of help themselves out later on in the season when things get a little tougher.
Absolutely agree. I think it really couldn't start off much better than that. I mean, you get the Raiders where you feel like, you know, you have a coaching advantage. You feel like you have an advantage on offense. probably an advantage on defense there, definitely an advantage on special teams. Then you have the Carolina Panthers, who are coming off of one of the worst seasons in NFL history. They have a new coach. They have a lot of new pieces on offense. That's going to take some time for that to gel. They had a really good defense last year, but it wasn't enough to keep them in games. And then, of course, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have Russell Wilson at quarterback, and he was coming off of a pretty down year, that got him cut and let go from one of the biggest contracts for quarterbacks in NFL history. So I like the way that this season starts. I feel like there's a strong possibility that the Chargers could start this season 3-0.
And that's what you're hoping for. It'd be awesome. I mean, for the Chargers to get, 60% of the wins they had last season in their first 3 weeks by going 3-0 and going 3-0 before you head to the Kansas City Chiefs in week 4. I think that would be huge for them. Yeah. The toughest game in that stretch is the Steelers, because at least they're going to have a really good defense.
Yeah.
Put a lot of investment into that offensive line. We'll see what they look like. I mean, they'll have a couple weeks to figure it out. Will it be Justin Fields? Will it be Russell Wilson? Probably going to be Russell Wilson. But at the same time, it's not a game that feels unwinnable. For the Chargers going up against the Steelers, obviously it's a new regime, but those games always are crazy. So, I would expect no less from that game, because, I think the last Chargers-Steelers game was the Justin Herbert going off for almost 500 total yards, getting punched in the stomach by Cam Hayward.
Running all over the place.
Yeah, those games are always nuts. And, the Panthers, after the debacle they had in 2023, trading up to the first overall pick, picking the wrong guy probably,
Their owner throwing stuff at fans.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also their owner tampering and saying, hey, I want the guy from Alabama instead of, Frank Reich, their coach, who got fired halfway through the season, who wanted C.J. Stroud, who went on to have one of the best rookie seasons of all time and looks awesome.
Got that.
And then also on top of that, you lose your first round pick this year. So they didn't even have a pick until the second round to actually do anything this year. I think that's about as favorable as a start as you can get. Last year, you opened up with the Dolphins, who were tough. Then you ended up getting the Titans, who it didn't end up being super good, but at the same time, they ended up beating you. So I think this is a chance for Jim Harbaugh to really get this season off to the right start. And I would love to see them obviously go 3-0. 2-1 feels almost realistic, or almost, probable, and more than possible, it feels like. But overall, the Chargers, after finishing last place in the AFC West this year, just have a much easier schedule. Last year, they went into the year with a much tougher schedule. Part of the reason is they get the NFC South on their schedule, which, had a sub 500 team make the playoffs last year. So that's going to be a big part of it. The only three of the 4 teams that have an easier schedule than the Chargers are all in the NFC South. It's the Falcons, the Saints, and the Carolina Panthers, because they get to play each other 6 times a year, right? And so that makes a lot of sense. But the teams they play this year have a combined winning percentage in 2023 of 478. That's quite a bit under 500. So you never really know how these things are going to play out. There's going to be teams we think are good that are not good, and there's teams that we think are bad that are going to be much better. But still, I'd rather take this end of it than be where they were last year, where you kind of knew it was going to be a slog and knew you were going to have to go up against some juggernauts in the schedule.
Yeah, this is the byproduct of having one of the, worst records in the NFL last year. This is just what's going to happen, and also why there's a lot of turnover, and why every single year there are teams that made the playoffs the previous year that won't make it this year, and vice versa. So I think you look at this Chargers schedule, the way it's set up, I think it's pretty favorable for the Chargers to be able to really turn things around quite quickly. I feel like they have the right man in charge with Jim Harbaugh. They have, I think, a very innovative, very qualified defensive coordinator with Jesse Minter, who has some pieces to really, get off to a very good start on defense. And I think Joe Ortiz has done a great job in arming both of those men to be able to go out there and make a statement, a statement for the inaugural year of their regime, right? Jim Harbaugh stated his goal very, very clearly when he got here. It's to win multiple championships. And this right here is the start of that journey.
And I think it's just a great chance for him to continue his streak of not having a losing season in the NFL.
Yeah.
There's no layups. There's no cupcakes on any schedule. There's no gimmies, right? Every game is tough in its own way, and any team can win on any given week. I don't know if any team's going to go 0-17 for the first time ever in 2024. At the same time, I think the other nice thing about kind of having an easier schedule and also having an easier start is they can work their way into things, right? A lot of turnover on this roster, an entirely new coaching staff, a ton of new guys in the front office. they will have a chance to kind of build that identity. We know what they think it's going to be, right? But like until you actually see dudes on the field putting guys in the dirt and actually living out that kind of physical, tough mentality, you don't know. So that gives you a chance, right? It gives you a chance to kind of have that runway to your tougher part of the schedule, and then you'll have some easier games later on, which we will get into because up next we're getting into the toughest stretch of the season. I mean, there is a really, really brutal 4-game stretch the Chargers have later on in the season we'll talk about, and also the chance to end the season kind of the way we're talking about beginning the season. A really, really favorable last 4 games for the Chargers for them to finish things strong. So we're going to talk about that and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First of all, I need to tell you guys about Gametime, and if you guys are trying to go be there for Jim Harbaugh's opening game debuting at SoFi Stadium against the Raiders, you better be checking your Gametime app because Gametime is the only place that will guarantee you the best prices, because if you find somewhere else that has the same row and seat for less, they will give you 110% of that price. That is one of the great things about Gametime. The other great thing I love about Gametime is you know exactly what you're going to pay up front. And the other great thing is if you wait a little bit, the longer you wait, the closer it gets to that game actually kicking off, the cheaper the prices get. And they also have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. But if you guys want to be there for week 1 against the Raiders, make sure you get the Gametime app so you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. You can save some money that way too. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, David, we talked about some of the great stuff at the beginning of the Chargers schedule and just getting to start against the Raiders and having kind of a favorable start. But let's flip the page a little bit and talk about the toughest stretch of the season. And it wasn't hard for us to go through the schedule and figure out what the toughest stretch is. And for me, it was pretty easy. I mean, you look at weeks 11 through 14. Week 11 at the Bengals. Week 12, Monday Night Football versus the Ravens. Week 13 against Atlanta. And week 14, the second of 2 games against the Kansas City Chiefs. Really, the last chance for you to knock them down a peg and help yourself out in the divisional standings and in the AFC standings comes in week 14. That's pretty brutal. I mean, if you're talking about the easiest game there, that might be Atlanta. And Atlanta probably should be a lot better this year with Kirk Cousins. I mean, that's a team that was a borderline playoff team with Desmond Ridder and had to have kind of a blowout at the end of the season for them to knock it in and get Arthur Smith fired that year. But David, that is a gauntlet right there. I mean, that 4-game stretch is going to be incredibly tough for the Chargers if those teams are anywhere kind of near as good as we think they're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only thing that makes me a little bit happy is at least 2 of those 4 games, the first 2 are going to be played at home, and they're played back-to-back at home, a part of a 3-game stretch of them being able to play at home, which I do like.
Bengals and Ravens at home is great, for sure.
I'm very much happy about that. But, of course, you have the Bengals with Joe Burrow coming back to play quarterback. So, you know, obviously we know what he's capable of doing. What he's done against the Chiefs, it definitely speaks for itself. The Ravens have the NFL MVP, you know, the reigning MVP with Lamar Jackson, and just had the number 1 defense in the NFL last year. So we know that's going to be tough. I mean, that's the Harbaugh too. I mean,
yeah, I'm excited about that.
That one had to be a primetime game, right? I think that was one of them we knew for sure before the schedule even came out that one was going to be on primetime without question. And then, of course, you have Kirk Cousins there with Bijan Robinson and honestly a slew of some very talented offensive weapons there. I think that's a team that could definitely go one way or another. Depends on Kirk Cousins' health and, you know, if he's able to stay out there. And then the Chiefs at Arrowhead in a potential cold weather game in December. Like that's always ugly. I mean, we know that's a raucous environment, very, very loud. And I mean, the Chiefs are the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. So that is going to be a tough matchup. The Chargers have always played them tough in the past. Let's see if Jim Harbaugh is able to get them over that hump.
Yeah, and you're hoping at that point in the season it's going to be a really, really important game for you too. But yeah, the Harbaugh Bowl, I mean, that is just going to be a slugfest. I think the other nice thing going to what you were talking about the Chiefs game is it does feel like the Chargers are building this team to be a December team, to be a January football team where the cold's not going to scare them, right? Because they will be a physical smash mouth. You're not going to want to play us in December and January type of team. And almost, hey, we'd rather play you in Kansas City where it's cold because it's not going to hurt it's going to hurt a lot more than if you're playing in Southern California.
Yeah.
So I think that actually kind of plays in the Chargers' favor a little bit if this team actually kind of looks like we hope they're going to look like and can kind of find that identity that we know Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to install in this team. But yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert, a chance to go 3-0 against Joe Burrow. I mean, yes, one game was Tyrod Taylor in a terrible game where I think Randy Bullock missed a 30-yard field goal. Not the point, but 3-0 against Joe Burrow. And I remember when, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow always compared to each other, especially early on. It's faded a little bit. If Joe Burrow is healthy, though, that should be a hell of a matchup. We know that the Ravens are going to be, a chance for, Jim Harbaugh to get a little revenge from the Super Bowl, chance for the Chargers to get a little revenge about what happened last year against the Ravens.
And Joe Ortiz to go up against his former team.
Joe Ortiz going up against his former team as well. But let's talk about the easiest stretch of the season. And I think this is another part that kind of works out favorably. It's always kind of hard to find a 4-game stretch where you're not playing a single team that you're scared of, right? It's surrounded kind of by 3 other teams. But since you finished last in the AFC West last year, that's possible. And the best 4-game stretch for the Chargers next season comes in their final 4 games. A really, really good chance to finish the season strong. And I love that. Weeks 15 through 18, you get Tampa Bay. You get week 16 against the Broncos, week 17 against the Patriots, and week 18, like we talked about, ending things with the Raiders. Chance for revenge on that week 18 overtime tie game and so many other things. And hopefully, I mean, they're probably not going to be good enough to be in playoff contention there, but it would be nice, just to stick it in. Maybe they're trying for a wild card and they need a bunch of things to happen. And just kind of finishing them, giving them a fatality in week 18 would also be great. But I think, Dave, that's easily, to me, the easiest 4-game stretch of the Chargers 2024 season.
I completely agree. I love the fact that the Chargers will have an opportunity to hopefully have a strong runway to get to the playoffs. I mean, I think that's obviously what we want. That's what Jim Harbaugh's brought in here to do. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at a Bucs team that was 9-8 last year in a pretty bad division. They were the one that led that division. The Broncos with the rookie quarterback, we'll see what they look like. That's going to be a team that's under a lot of change. So we'll see if they're in contention or where they're at that point. The Patriots, again, with another rookie quarterback. That's another cold weather game there, but I'm not, as worried about that particular game there. And then, finishing up with the Raiders. I'd love the opportunity to start the season beating the Raiders and finish the season beating the Raiders. That's what I want. I don't want any more splits. I'm tired of splitting with the Raiders. The Chargers are a better football team than them. They need to instill what they instilled in the early 2000s, which was that string of 13 straight victories. That needs to start again in 2024, and it starts with beating them the first game of the season and smacking them again at the end of the season.
I love that. That would be the perfect bookends to hopefully playoff season if you can finish it, start it by beating the Raiders and finish it by beating the Raiders. And that'd be great, man. I mean, those were our best times as Chargers fans, right? Both of us were kids watching the Chargers just absolutely dominate the Raiders. I mean, especially when I was a kid, like you had no kind of historical context either. So it's like all I've known really is the Raiders being bad.
Beating them up. Yep.
Like, and still to this day, I mean, I don't know how many playoff, trips they've had since their Super Bowl in like 2002, but like they've been bad.
0? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
pretty much
0.
my whole life. Yeah, I feel like they had one playoff trip with Derek Carr where he like broke his leg or something like that, and he didn't even get to start in the game. But besides that, I mean, obviously
0 wins though. 0.
Oh yeah. 0 wins in the playoffs, sure.
Oh yeah.
But I think the other part too, the Broncos obviously playing with a rookie quarterback and also just dealing with the ramifications of one of the worst trades in NFL history. Because
one of the worst signings in NFL history.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst trades and then also one of the worst extensions in NFL history. So you're not only dealing with the ramification of, not having the draft picks that you would need to kind of build that team into a contender, but also this dead cap that you have to take on over the next few years is going to be historical, literally the most ever.
Immense.
But the Buccaneers are definitely the toughest game front right now looking at it during that stretch. Pretty good defense. We'll see if Baker Mayfield, if that kind of carriage turns into a pumpkin again. We'll see. He had a great run. Happy for what he was able to do last year after getting kind of screwed over. Patriots, new coach and a rookie quarterback. Obviously, the Chargers have a new coach, but they have an elite quarterback. They're an interesting one, too, because it kind of like the Steelers, like, I know that their defense is probably still going to be really good. I mean, the Chargers beat them, 6-0 last year. in a really, really terrible game.
Yeah.
Patriots defense, even with Rob Mayo, they're probably still going to be very, very good defense. We'll see what Drake May has, right? I mean, he's a project guy looking at it from the outside looking in. We'll see what he looks like by week 17, with basically a full season under his belt if they start him from the beginning. But if the Chargers, I mean, that just feels like you have a legitimate chance to go 4-0 in December and January football right there. And I think if you're, I think it's really just about get to that point still in contention.
Yes.
Do what you have to do to get to week 15 still right in.
Be in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you have a winning record going into week 15 and you have those 4 games to end your season, you're talking about a team that's going to be pushing potentially for even a division title. I'm not going to give them that. We still have to see it. But if you can get to that point right there, maybe you split with the Chiefs, you're going to be in really, really good shape. But we haven't even talked about how the Chargers release their schedule, which, again, an all-time schedule release after back-to-back anime releases, the Chargers go with the Sim World for their 2024 schedule release. And I think, especially after the standard that they've set over the last couple of seasons, I crushed it. And they absolutely crushed every opponent that they have in the AFC West. So many nuggets, and we're getting to a lot of them and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. That means you could literally go into any of the playoff action, even the baseball action as well, and find the biggest favorite. And if they win on the money line, you don't even have to do it against the spread. You get $150 in bonus bets to play with. And one of my favorite things, same game parlays and live in-game betting. I feel like, especially being a Chargers fan my whole life, there are certain games where you just know something's going to happen. It's like, I've seen this play out before. That's why live in-game betting is huge, because sometimes I'll see some of the odds and I'm like, oh no, this game is going in the opposite direction of where they think this game is going. And I know as a scarred Chargers fan because I've seen it so many times before. So get in on this playoff action right now. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David. Well, now we have to get into the actual schedule release itself. And the Chargers, man, it must be such a pressure cooker in that room as they're coming up with what they want to do. I didn't think they would go anime release again for the 3rd consecutive year. I never really thought they were going to do that. But how do you live up to that, right? Because one of the best things about the animes was just like the amount of Easter eggs and nuggets that they had in there. Like it was just totally loaded with so many different kind of little things about all these teams and talking trash to all these teams. But we have to start with the division rivals because another release has come out and the Chargers absolutely cooked the AFC West in it. And it starts with the Raiders, who basically just starts off with them as clowns and ends up with, I mean, even worse things than that. But David, Chargers cooked in general, and they absolutely cooked their division rivals too.
I absolutely loved what they did to the AFC West opponents, man. It's so funny. I mean, starting off with them getting ready to be turning themselves into clowns, and then of course at the end with the Raiders, you have them in jail. All of the Raider fans in jail, all of the clowns in jail, which I absolutely love that. And then of course the Broncos Ballmart, because their owners are the owners of Walmart. The Chiefs with the Kelsey podcast, and of course an old tweet from 2011 where Travis Kelce's talking about squirrels and then gets distracted by Taylor Swift, which is absolutely hilarious. And then of course the second Chiefs part where they have Chiefsaholic on trial. And then of course the infamous Harrison Butker getting turned into a woman basically. Oh man, after his comments, he absolutely deserved everything that the Chargers did to him. It was pretty crazy what he was able to say there, but them putting that reverse Uno card on him, putting him in the kitchen, making him make food for everybody, I thought the symbolism there was just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison Butker basically saying the only reason he can be an NFL player is because his wife's at home in the kitchen making sandwiches. And then turning him into, making sandwiches and putting bouquets together at home was a nice touch. I mean, I think with the Raiders, having them celebrating, watching the 63-21 game on the TV, and it's a Raiders watch party, and they're all dressed up as clowns, and then it pans out, and then they're all actually in jail watching it on the prison screen was great. And I think Tom Telesco sitting outside it, but also the QR code, right? QR
Yes.
code pops up in the Raiders part of it, and if you click on it, it takes you to the World Clown Association, which I thought is awesome. I mean, that's great. The Chiefsaholic, if you guys aren't familiar with it, the Chiefs had a super fan who was basically robbing banks so that he could fund his away trips to go watch the Chiefs, and then got sentenced this year. So they had him in the court getting sentenced and crying. That was really, really
With Pat
funny.
McAfee. Yeah.
With Pat, yeah, of course, that's great. And then the Broncos, my favorite part was at the end, they had the sim going to a wishing well, and they had a choice to pick from 3 wishes. They could either get great uniforms, they could get a franchise quarterback, or they could get a ton of cap space. They end up picking the cap space. He flips the coin down the well, and it ends up sending him a bunch of dead cap, where it's like, you get nothing. You tried to release your uniforms. I wouldn't know what that feels like, because the Chargers have the best uniforms in the NFL. You got
In all of
terrible
sports.
uniforms. You have a terrible situation, potentially at quarterback. We'll see what happens with Bo Nix, but you totally struck out with Russell Wilson and set the franchise back by a couple of seasons at least because of it.
At least.
And then you're like, okay, well, maybe we have a lot of cap space. Nope, because you have the giant dead cap sitting on you. But yeah, Walmart, because the Broncos are owned by the Walmart family. So having all the Broncos fans going in and exchanging their jerseys for Chiefs jerseys was obviously great. But there was so much more, David. I mean, there were so many nuggets. It wasn't only the Chargers rivals that got the smoke. There was a ton of other great nuggets in there as well.
Oh my goodness! Of course, they had to get everybody. I mean, Sean Payton being played as Kevin James. Of course, the Bounty Gate there with the Saints, the no PI call. All of those were fantastic. The Browns, of course, all of them working in a UPS store. Basically, I thought that was pretty funny.
I think they were all elves, basically
Yeah.
working in prison. Yeah, so that was kind of funny. Yeah.
Of course, the Ravens and then the Harbaugh brothers just jumping on their beds. I thought that was
Having a
pretty cool.
pillow fight,
Yeah.
John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh in the middle, just squaring off with pillows is totally on brand.
And then, of course, the Falcons with DJ Kirk Cousins in there, and then him fumbling when Michael Penix walks in, which was hilarious to me. The Bucks with Baker Mayfield and him burning everything that he was actually baking, and then, of course, making fun of the Patriots and making fun of the fact that their dynasty is no more and that they are going to have to start all the way over.
Yeah, they basically are. It's like a retirement community of some sort. You have Tom Brady painting over here. You have Gronk doing some weird stuff over here. No Bill Belichick with the Patriots, obviously, now. Yeah, the Kirk Cousins one I thought was hilarious. You know, you have Kirk Cousins shirtless, wearing a bunch of chains, and then Michael Penix walks in his Washington jersey out of nowhere, and just like everyone's like, what? As you have like Migos at the table, Lou Williams and his infamous lemon pepper wings in the background. I mean, just like there's, I'm sure, so many things I didn't even see, you know what I mean? But like the layers to it for them is just insane. Another one with the Saints game is they're going down Bourbon Street, and then you see Stephen A. Smith, who's basically fighting a fat Zion Williamson because they called him fat, and you just have them pushing each other in the street. I thought was awesome. And then even the bye week, David, like the bye week, just having Justin Herbert wearing an Oregon shirt, playing mini golf, super
Fishing.
on brand. Yeah, and then
Cooking a brisket. Yeah.
cooking a brisket as well, obviously. I mean, for him, that's great. And then another underrated one I thought was the Steelers, because you have Russell Wilson moving into a house as someone's robbing it, basically. And then right as he's kind of settling in, who walks in the door? Justin Fields. I mean, it was just electric. David, I mean, I struggle to say it's better than the anime releases. I mean, it's so hard because I think you're kind of really just, picking, like nitpicking if you find anything wrong with it. And like, I just think you're splitting hairs if you're trying to decide between any of the last 3. I thought it was the right call to double up on the anime release. I did not see that coming. To go with this one with the Sims this year, maybe not as good as those ones, but like still, to me, the goated social media department in the NFL.
Everybody is following the Chargers social media team. I think the Tennessee Titans one is pretty funny. I'll give them that. But honestly, they're all
some good ones
following the
out there.
Chargers, all of them. I mean, the anime releases were goated. This one, I think it might be just a small step underneath it, but still incredible. I mean, the level of attention to detail, all of the nuggets they were able to sprinkle all throughout the schedule release video. I mean, hats off to the Chargers' incredible social media team. Like you said, I mean, it's got to be so much pressure to have to follow up what they did the last 2 years and to be able to come up with this. I thought this was creative. I thought it was innovative, and it definitely took the NFL schedule release world by storm once again.
And honestly, I feel like the Chargers doing what they do with the schedule release has elevated the entire NFL. Like,
Yeah.
so many people have seen the success the Chargers have had and have all stepped their game up so much that we get so many amazing schedule releases. And I give sole credit to the Chargers because when you're talking about a social media team, their Super Bowl is the schedule release. And although it hasn't happened on the field, if that was the Super Bowl, the Chargers would be an absolute dynasty because they go out there and they crush it every single season. They'll throw all of our opponents as Pop-Tarts in just as filler, and they crush that as
The
well.
Raiders one was trash, by the way.
It was garbage, yeah, and I mean, it definitely ticked off some actual, former Raiders players as well as David saw. They were complaining a little bit about that. And they keep bringing up 63-21. 63-21 might as well be, if you were spelling it out, Jim Harbaugh, because that's what happened. I would trade that beatdown any day of the week to get Joe Ortiz and Jim
Any
Harbaugh.
day.
I think, honestly, it's one of the best things that's happened in Chargers history. Truly, I do. But we didn't even get to everything about the schedule. There's so much more, including 3 primetime games. You're going to give a, lame duck Brandon Staley 5 primetime games to start, 6 primetime games, and you're going to give Jim Harbaugh, the return of Jim Harbaugh, the national championship winning coach, 3 primetime games. We're going to talk about that, as well as the Chargers once again getting an early bye, which kind of sucks. They have the most travel of any team in the NFL. So we talked about some of the easiest stuff. The NFL is trying to even things out because the Chargers have some tough things working against them as well. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for that by subscribing and following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports and David at Dro Talk SD on Twitter, as well as the show's page at Locked On LAC. You can find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We'll probably do some fan mail stuff too. So if you guys want to call into the voicemail line, you can at 323-524-7924. If you leave a 30-second Chargers question, there's a good chance you're getting it on the show. But A+ again for the Chargers social media team. Absolutely cooking with this schedule release. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.